Revolution Foods, in general, is charging right around a $3 price point for our meals. And that's for our lowest income schools. So there is, we know that we have to operate as close to that reimbursement rate as possible in order to be viable for our schools nationally. Schools directly receive funding from the government. We are not receiving funding from the government. Schools receive the funding from the government. We build the schools. So what we do is we sit down with a financial model with our schools. We work out basically so it's completely transparent to them all the assumptions around the reimbursement rate, their participation rate, and what their financial forecast looks like in terms of working with us.
And participation rate means that the kids choose to buy the lunch.
How many students are eating lunch every day, exactly.
And that's an election on their part.
Build a financial model for them so that they have complete budget transparency on if there is any investment in a healthy meal program, what that would look like.
Now, we were coming in and saying we're going to select the site, we're going to develop the infrastructure, the civil infrastructure, we're going to build the homes, we're going to build a community afterwards. Then now we're saying, okay, maybe a more higher level impact is that we partner up with organizations that can do the first part. They have the land and they have the civil infrastructure, and we can make sure that the right people get in there, and we can make sure that 5 years from now it's a development or a project that we can all look to with some sort of pride. And so this is something which is live and happening right now that we're thinking through, that how do we position ourselves for this. So there's a very easy thing that, hey, let's just focus on profits and let's sort of monopolize this because nobody else in Pakistan knows how to do this. And then there's the other issue that, hey, we can only do 10,000, 15,000 units a year. As Matt said, that's not going to really solve the problem.
But everybody immediately thinks of debt as a way to pay for college. So how do you overcome that societal norm and expectation that if I got to go to college, I take on debt, and get your name out there such that you can build the kind of scale that will ultimately be successful? And how do you think of funding what could be a significant marketing expense?
So we think that through viral communication and because of the innovation of the system, the marketing is going to be done mostly by the students.
We spend a lot of time trying to convince investors that this is, something that will be appealing for families. But I think, paying attention to the population that we're working with and the really high level of debt aversion that population has explains why the marketing is not as difficult as I think you might imagine. So if you're from a middle class family in the U.S., you have this idea of using debt to pay for college. If you're from a first-generation Hispanic family in the U.S., you're terrified of debt. And so you can see just by kind of presenting the concept, there is an immediate understanding of why this is more appealing than the idea of taking on traditional debt.
I think what we've all learned the hard way in the past couple of years is that risk is not necessarily something that the markets run away from. Risk people are okay with. It's uncertainty that they're not okay with. So the two things that I think you will learn at Lumni is what is the default rate and what is the attrition rate. And then you can begin to understand your underwriting. And then it's a question of how safe does this capital market need the water to be before they jump in, and identifying what's at risk, and then figuring out how to take that risk off the table with something that Matt would invest in or some other place, and to reinvent yourself as the next generation micro Sally Mae.
You never knew where there was going to be a problem as you scaled, but you knew there was going to be a problem. And it was over here in HR, and then it was over here in operations, and it was over here in marketing. But there was always something because you were scaling so rapidly, and dare I say technology in the case of eBay as well. So we recognize it's a huge challenge generally. We at Omidyar Network also invest in firms at a very early stage. So we're actually self-selecting into a pool of organizations that, yes, can have massive scale impact, but in order, almost by definition, to have that scale impact, they're going to have to scale. So it is actually one of our core principles is to invest heavily behind the organization with human capital.